What's up, everybody? Good Friday morning. Made it to the end of another week. Almost made it to the end of another year. And we got a little bit of Seahawks stuff to go over from yesterday. A couple of interesting comments from two current Seahawks. Two Seahawks legends, in fact. Two of the greatest players in franchise history. And most of what they said is not news to people on my channel. Most of what they said seems somewhat obvious. Frankly, I think that a lot of the stuff they were saying just makes a lot of sense to people who watch my videos. But it's always kind of interesting when something that people on the internet are talking about moves up to the point where the players start talking about those same things. Because over the past couple years, I have talked about the possibility of the Seahawks moving on from players like Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson. And the reasons why this may happen have been pretty obvious to me for a while. The money, he's owed a lot of money next year. A lot of savings if you move on from him. He's getting older, already starting to show some age. He's not really all that great in coverage anymore. Not a big presence on the blitz at this point. Not that he ever really was. Value is getting diminished by the way the modern NFL works. All these things, they seem very obvious to me, but sometimes people come into these streams, comment on my videos, and they just go, "What the hell are you talking about, dude? Bobby Wagner is a legend. He's one of the greatest Seahawks players of all time. We're not going to cut him. Are you crazy?" And when it's just people like me and maybe the obscure Seahawks writer on Twitter, maybe we are a little bit crazy. Maybe that statement has a little bit of merit to it. Because if you step back from all that stuff, you will see Bobby Wagner, the legendary linebacker, one of the greatest middle linebackers in NFL history, like top 5, maybe top 3, I don't know. Some of the greatest accomplishments that any middle linebacker has ever had. Some of the greatest accomplishments that any Seattle Seahawks player has ever had. And you go, are we really going to actually move on from this guy? Like, it makes all the sense in the world when I lay it out. But is this going to be a situation where you throw logic out the door because Bobby Wagner has just been too meaningful to this franchise? And you could say all those same things can also apply to Russell Wilson. But then you get something like this. So, two separate press conferences were held yesterday. One with Bobby Wagner and the other with Russell Wilson. I'll lead with the Wagner one. Brady Henderson sums it up here. Bobby Wagner said yesterday that, yes, he has wondered about his future beyond 2021 with his large cap number and this disappointing Seahawks season potentially giving way to a roster shakeup, even as he continues to be a tackling machine. So, for us to sit in YouTube streams or on Twitter or Reddit and talk about this stuff and put the argument together and look at the money, look at his numbers, look at his overall performance and go, yeah, this makes all the sense in the world. We should move on from Bobby Wagner this offseason. For us to say that, okay, we can do that, but is the team just going to be completely blinded by it being Bobby Wagner to the point where they don't even think about it? Before yesterday, I think you could have made a reasonably compelling argument that that was the case, but to hear the player start to address it, that has to turn your head. That has to make you realize this is something that could happen. And the way Bobby Wagner commented on this issue in his presser, it sounded like a guy who knew what was up. It sounded like a guy who knew that, yeah, I'm getting older. I'm due over $20 million next year. We got the heir apparent waiting in the wings behind me, Jordan Brooks. First round pick, needs to start playing his natural position. He must know on some level that his game has slipped, especially in coverage, where I don't think he's playing terribly or anything, but it's not great. It's definitely not great. He has to be aware of these things. And for him to actually come out and say it must mean he has a pretty good idea that this is likely going to happen. The comments that he made in that press conference did not sound like a guy who had a lot of confidence he would be here next year. And I've said many times that if this team is going to actually live in a world of like logic and sound roster building and what makes sense in the modern NFL, it makes no sense to keep Wagner at all. You cannot pay a middle linebacker who is really only strong against the run anymore $20 million. You just can't. That's not how the league works anymore. So this is not surprising to me. I don't think it's surprising to most people on this channel. But to hear it from the player himself, it really makes you realize that, hey, this isn't just something that we talk about on the internet to shoot the breeze and waste time. Talk about how this is what we would do if we were in charge, but we know it's not going to happen. And that statement goes even more so for Russell Wilson's press conference yesterday, where he was relatively non-committal. When his press conference started, it seemed like there were some things that he wanted to say, but he didn't get asked the right questions to where he could fluidly say these things. So he kind of brute forced it in there. He, without really being asked, basically came out and said that, I hope I'm here next year. I think he reiterated that sentiment like 3 times in this interview. He said, I hope I'm here next year. But the comments he made it very clear that he's aware that this could be it for him in Seattle. That he could be out of here after the year. That this upcoming game against the Lions could be his last home game. And maybe this one isn't quite as notable because obviously the Russell Wilson trade rumors were spicy last offseason. They were all over the place last offseason, so we know the possibility has crossed this team's mind before. So the fact that we're revisiting this is notable, but maybe it's not an earth-shattering event. However, the fact that Wilson seemed to go out of his way to bring it up, and I invite you guys to really listen to the presser and see how he makes sure he can bring this up. It almost sounds like he's trying to find a way to prepare people for what is going to happen this offseason. It almost sounds like he knows I'm probably going to get moved, and I'm okay with that, so I'm going to find some way to talk about this going into what could be my last home game for the Seattle Seahawks. So it kind of feels like this is headed towards a place where, yeah, this is actually going to happen. And again, it's one thing for us to sit around on YouTube and talk about why it should happen or why it could happen or why it makes sense, this, that. But for the players to come out and address it like this, where at no point does Wilson even say, I'm going to be here for the next 10 years, I'm going to play 20 years in Seattle, I'm going to retire a Seahawk, etc., all these things that he has said in the past. For him to just say, I hope it's not my last season in Seattle, it almost sounds like he's laying the tracks. And I think he's done some things to try to prepare people for the possibility in the past. Some of the things he even said last year, or, well, last offseason. But this was surprisingly direct, and I feel like it's telling. Now, with all the signs that we've gotten from this organization over the last week, and I don't say this happily, I'm not happy about this. It sounds like our solution to this bad season is to maintain the coaching staff, maintain the front office, and make the changes on the roster. You got Carroll coming out and pretty confidently stating that he thinks that the team doesn't need to be blown up and that Jody has his back. That tells me that Pete and John are returning. And then you have Russ and Bobby, 2 of the most legendary Seahawks of all time, coming out and saying these things. It kind of makes me feel like they know what's going to happen here. Somebody has to go. It's going to be the players. It's not going to be the coaches and the front office. So I'm not happy about that. I want to be clear about that. However, I will acknowledge that the play of particularly Russell Wilson has opened the door for this over the last year and a half. Russell Wilson has not played very well over the last year and a half. A lot of his good games have come against substandard opposition. So when he does that, he opens the door for something like this to happen. If Russell Wilson was playing out of his mind the last year and a half, this would not be a thing. You couldn't trade a Russell Wilson. You couldn't even broach the topic without inviting a riot over in the Lumen Field. So, at the end of the day, Wilson owns part of the responsibility for why it goes this way, if it does go this way. That being said, let me be very clear, this is not the way I would go. I have my issues with Wilson, to be sure. I'm not the president of his fan club, but if this team is really going to choose a 70-year-old head coach with a 40-year-old philosophy over a 33-year-old quarterback who was a fringe MVP candidate the last 4 seasons before this one, I think that's a really bad idea. I think that's pretty bad, and it disappoints me. But that is the way things seem like they're going as I stand here right now. And I'm not going to deny that. Things can change. I think it's also possible, frankly, that nothing really changes. We bring back the players and the coaches and the front office. I think it's possible that Carroll really does believe that this season is all just bad luck. Sounds like something he would believe, honestly. But these comments from Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson, they really kind of brought home the fact that it's not just us fans who see that who think that this could be coming or maybe even should be coming. They see it too. So let me know what you guys think. Did these comments from Bobby and Wilson change your perspective? Is this something that you didn't see as a realistic possibility before, but these comments made you kind of feel like, oh, yeah, this is probably going to happen after all. If they're saying it like this, then yeah, I guess so. I feel like that if you were one of the people, and I know they're out there, who believed that you could never consider moving on from guys like Wagner and Wilson, like they should just be allowed to stay here as long as they want to stay here, I think that these comments from these two players should at least make you aware of the fact that it might not be that clean. I'll see you guys later today. Peace out. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think.